All right, here we go for Module 3, Lesson 7b, where we're going to kind of talk about the primitive hexapods and Paleoptera. So we're going to focus here on the non-flying six-legged arthropods and Paleoptera, the mayflies and dragonflies. We'll go through the critical orders that are there, as well as the characteristics of those orders. And we're going to look at a few different phylogenies. This is the basic one that I built of all the insects. So the non-flying six-legged arthropods here, the Paleoptera, which we're going to talk about, then the Polyneoptera, Perineoptera, and Holometabula. The major groups of insects you can see are right here: the Polyneoptera, the Perineoptera, and the Holometabula. We'll get to all those groups as we go through these things. But first, we're going to kind of focus down here today on the Paleoptera, as well as the non-flying six-legged hexapods that aren't even actually on this phylogeny. So I flipped it here to kind of mirror what's going on here, just so we could kind of see it better. We have the non-flying six-legged arthropods that actually, most of those aren't here, but the Archaeognatha and Zygentoma are right here. I apologize, they're upside down. I didn't have time to rewrite all these things, but it doesn't really matter. We're going to talk the Paleoptera, the Odonata and Ephemeroptera that are right here. And then as you see, as you kind of go down, you travel down, then you have the Polyneoptera. It's just like traveling down this branch here to the Polyneoptera here. The Perineoptera is a little more up in the air right now as we look at it. This image is from 2011. It's been a little bit better resolved. And then the Holometabula definitely forms its own group right here, and that's represented on this tree by the Holometabula there. That's all of these insects here. So, non-flying six-legged arthropods and the Paleoptera. Before we even get into that, actually, I want to spend a little time with classification, because we're going to talk about classes. We're already in the phylum Arthropoda, the arthropods. We're going to get into classes. We're going to get into orders after that. So how do we classify everything? Well, Linnaeus gave us this system, and it's okay. It's not great. It's pretty old, but we use it now. Kingdom Animalia. We can kind of use this. Not really, but it works for this image. Phylum Arthropoda. So we're in the arthropods. We're going to spend a lot of time in the insecta today. And then order is the Diptera. What you'll find is when you're trying to put 1,000,000 organisms into a class on down, it gets to the point where you need a lot more divisions. Like you need suborders and superfamilies and subfamilies and subgenera and superspecies and subspecies. We're not going to worry that much about that in this class. So we don't need to worry too much about that, but Linnaeus kind of gave us this, and it works on the mammal level fairly well, not on the insect level as well. But we can look at insecta. The order Diptera are the flies. We have the Muscids, which is the family Muscidae, genus Musca, and the species Domestica. Musca domestica is just the genus and species name for the housefly, and they're kind of annoying, but it's really fun now. And there's a housefly flying around, you can tell your friends, like, hey, look at that Musca domestica. And when we talk about that Musca domestica or Homo sapiens or anything like that, that's binomial nomenclature. Okay, that means like the two name system, genus and species. And I got this image from somewhere else. I apologize. This should be lowercase. It should not be uppercase. The sapiens, but we have the two name system for binomial nomenclature, the genus and the species, and that's what we use for everything. Kind of it's as identifier. It's actually backwards. You know, my name is Matt Gruwell. Matt being my first name, Gruwell being my second name. Gruwell kind of puts me in a bigger family of other individuals. In this case, Homo is actually the one that puts you in a bigger family of other individuals, and Sapiens is more specific for a species. So here we can look at different human species, all is in the genus Homo, like Homo erectus, heidelbergensis, rudolfensis, habilis, floresiensis, neanderthalensis, and finally Homo sapiens, the other species that we share a genus with. All right. So now we're going to look at my image here, the non-flying six-legged arthropods and the Paleopteran. I found a paper that actually focused on a few key characteristics of that group. We're not going to worry so much about the characteristics, but it actually spliced them out in more detail for us. So here, with the first occurrence of SMI is also the first occurrence of six-legged organisms. So then you have Protura, Columbella, and Dipleura. These three right here are the ones that are not considered insecta, but they're hexapoda, right? So hexapoda kind of starts right here. Insecta actually, let's make a little mark right here. It's going to start right here, okay? And then wings, so W for wings, are going to evolve right there. So this is the line where wings begin. And I kind of clustered all these Protura, Columbella, Dipleura, Archaegnatha, Zygentoma in this group. It's not done correctly, but that's okay. You can see how they are all related to each other as we look at it down here from this Blanky et al. Paper from 2015. And so that's what we're going to try and get to today. We're going to try and get through Protura, Columbella, Dipleura, right? Columbella, Dipleura, Archaegnatha, Zygentoma. We'll skip Paleodictyoptera. We'll actually mention that when we talk about the evolution of wings, and then Paleoptera right there. And then we'll say Polyneoptera and these other things for another time. So there's it kind of just blown up looking at it by itself, and what we're going to try and get covered here. Another way that people try and break up it all, so like I said, here is the hexapods. I need to get a little better system here. Protura, Columbella, Dipleura, right? Those are the entognatha, mouth parts protected inside the head. And you should know that, class entognatha. So hexapoda is really a superclass, probably. It's between phylum and class. And then we have class Insecta, right? Which is all these. And it's all about the mouth parts, the ectognatha, mouth parts outside of the head, really. A lot more variation can happen. It allowed for a lot of really great diversity, a diversity of mouth parts, just a wonderful opportunity for insects to evolve and change and grow. So we have class Entognatha and class Insecta, which is kind of the ectognatha. All right. So Entognatha, the first order is the order Protura. Protura are crazy little things. They almost like a little worm with legs. They have no eyes and no antennae. They have no wings. They have very little sensory perception, actually. They kind of just live in the soil. They live in decomposing logs. They eat a lot of fungus and some bacteria and other organic material. It's just whatever they can get their mouths on. They're really small. See, biggest, we're looking at like 1.5 millimeters in length. There's about 800 species. They're hard to find. I've actually only collected these a couple times in my life from leaf litter, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking through leaf litter, to be completely fair and honest here. As we're going to go down the Entognatha, now we get to Columbella. I love Columbella. Columbella are fantastic little critters. They're called the springtails because they have this little tail on the end that actually can help them jump. They can jump quite a good distance for their body size, right? They're 3 to 6 millimeters in length. They can easily hop a couple of inches by kind of winding up this spring and then letting it fire, and it shoots off, and they kind of shoot to another place. So let's look at the key characters. About 7,000 species. There's quite a few different families. You can hear the Entomobriidae. We're not going to worry about the families of these. Don't try and memorize them or anything. These are the Smithiers. These little globular shaped ones are so cool. But we do have antennae now. We don't have wings, but we got antennae, we got eyeballs and other things. And my phone's ringing. Sorry about that. Get that hung up on real quick. So, interesting thing, they have no tracheation. So we talked tracheation, that's how they get air in, and as it gets air into its body. These do not have that. They just respire through the cuticle. Here's a little cool little video, and I've linked it into the lesson so you can watch it, just about these things, because they can get into crazy high numbers. As you can see here, they're really important for breaking down and recycling nutrients in the soil. They're very important for soil conditioning, and there can be upwards of 800,000 of them in a single cubic yard. They're crazy numbers. So the way that they spring, let me go to the pen here. This is their spring of their fricula, which you don't really need to know that, but it gets tucked up under the catching mechanism right here, and then they can put resistance against that, and then fire off. And when they do that, it launches them. It's kind of their only escape mechanism. They're not really that fast, so that's kind of all they've got to play with there. All right. Our next group of the primitive hexapods and the Entognatha are the Dipleura. And again, these three groups, they're kind of just really, really small, living in moist, underbarked stones, rotting logs, caves. These also don't have eyes. They do have antennae. They're not as small as the Protura. They're a little bit more advanced than the Protura, but not really by a lot. And that's kind of all you need to know. That they are the order Dipleura, pale, absent eyes. They have antennae in bark litter. The kind of basic body structure. They do not jump. They're not as cool as the Columbella, unfortunately for them. So there's our Protura and our Columbella and our Dipleura. So now we reach this point in the tree, right? Here's the hexapods. One branch came this way and branched into the Protura and the Columbella. The other branch came this way. And one speciation branch went to what's going to become the insects. And the other one became the Dipleura. Not many Dipleurans. The insects, over time, there's probably been upwards of 50 million species. All because they evolved that external mouth feeding mechanism, and that kind of just took off, right? So Dipleura got a bit of the short end of the stick, and now we kind of come this way into the true insects and the Ectognatha. So what do we got here? The first are the Archaeognatha. We kind of well, I guess it won't let me go back, which is kind of interesting when you're in recording mode. That's okay. The Archaeognatha, right? These are the bristletails. So now things are looking a little bit more like an insect. They have elongated bodies. They have this kind of big arched back, kind of humpback looking body form. They have three long tail-like structures, these filaments that are coming off of the end of their abdomen. You can see all three of them better in this little critter up here. They have mouth parts that are partially retractable. They have simple chewing mandibles. They have two large compound eyes. They jump really well, and they're side to side flattened, right? So they're laterally flattened, and then kind of that hump shape that's going on there. Pretty cool little critters. Archaeognatha, you can probably guess archaeo, ancient, gnatha meaning mouth. So kind of the ancient mouth form there. And then the Zygentoma are the other ones. The Zygentoma are the silverfish and fire brats. You probably have seen these in your house at some point in time. They scurry around, especially at night. They are small, they're wingless, they're dorsal ventrally flattened. So they're flattened down to the surface. Not side to side flattened, but they're flattened more like that. They can get under crevices, they can get anywhere. They love to eat all sorts of stuff. I got that on the next slide. We'll cover that. Get there in a second. Body covered in scales. They're scavengers. They're really kind of annoying, the silverfish. You've probably seen them in your house, like I said, in your garage, your basement, running around. Not really that pleasant to have around. They love starchy substances, so they can be found feeding on glue, books, wallpaper, magazines, fabric. They'll also eat cereal grains. They'll get into anywhere they can and kind of chomp down on stuff. Not the greatest. Pretty serious, fairly serious household pests. I mean, they're not like a roach, right? Usually that bad. They're usually not that prolific. They can be, but they're usually not that bad. They're not that great either. Okay, so now that's taken us through the Protrua, Columbo, Diplura, Archaeognatha, Zygentoma. Now we are at this critical spot. So I talked about this critical spot right here, and this is where you got external mouth parts. I really need to get a new writing mechanism. Now we get wings here. Wings are even more important than external mouth parts, probably because now all the rest of the insects come from these insects that have wings, and that was really, really important. Just hugely important, right? Wings evolved right here. This is where we get our wings. That's so ugly, I apologize. And now we're talking 50 million plus species, over time, over the last 400 million years, so probably more than 50 million species. Wow, there's probably been a lot of insect species over a period of time. I don't know if there's a good estimate for that or not. But we're going to focus now on the Paleoptera, the mayflies and dragonflies. So mayflies, what are they? Their name means, ephemeral means short-lived, and ptera, which you'll see on all of these things just about, means wings. So they're short-lived critters with wings. I'm not sure. Well, a lot of the orders have some part of ptera in them. Ptera, like Coleoptera, Lepidoptera, Hymenoptera, Diptera. We see that a lot. They live only 1 to 2 days as adults. They can live years underwater. So they're aquatic as nymphs, living underwater in streams, in rivers, and lakes, all over the place. You used to have a lot more of these, but they're making a comeback, which is good. They have triangular front wings. They're really kind of cool. This is basically the shape of that front wing. They have really long front legs. You can see right there that kind of reach out. This species doesn't have super long ones. They have others with really, really long ones. 2 long filaments off the end of the abdomen as adults. 3 as nymphs. We'll look at that in a second. A very interesting fact that we're not going to get a lot deep into because we don't have a lot of time for all these different orders, but the males in some cases have 2 penises and the females have 2 gonopores, so 2 places where she can receive sperm. All right, and then they have hemimetabolous development. By now you should be fairly up on development and the different types of metamorphosis going on. Now we're into this hemimetabolous because the nymphs look a lot different than the adults. The adults have the wings. All right. They have 2 wing stages, the subimago and the adults, which is really, really weird. Most don't. All the other insects, they have the nymph or the larvae, and then they have the adult with the wings. Mayflies have 2 stages, the subimago and the imago, so that's really kind of weird. Here's a picture of a subimago that we're looking at. They're really, really pale. There's actually a lot of flies for fly fishing. If anybody out there's a fly fisherman, some of the paler flies that are supposed to be mayflies are these subimagos. So they're the only insects that molt again after they have functional wings, which is kind of crazy. they can have these huge outbreaks. When you're by big bodies of water that are really, really healthy and have lots of mayflies in them, you'll find huge outbreaks. Once I was in Illinois, right on the Mississippi River, and every branch was covered with hundreds of big mayflies. Here's a huge mayfly. It's so big it was on the Doppler. There was that many mayflies out over Lake Erie. Right, this is at the eastern end of Lake Erie that we're looking at here. Let me get the pointer here. Here's the down kind of here's Michigan and Ohio, and this huge outbreak of mayflies there. And this is kind of what it looks like, just all over the water. This car just absolutely covered with these kind of mayflies. That's pretty gross, even for me, and I love bugs. Why do they do it? Well, lots of reasons. They emerge in huge numbers. We'll probably get into swarming a little bit later in the semester, but huge numbers, they get a better chance of finding a mate, right? If everybody comes out together, you don't want to be the one person that they're only going to be alive for a day or two. So you don't want to emerge a week before everybody else and you don't get an opportunity to mate. That's pretty bad. Also, these things get chomped by fish like crazy, so safety in numbers. If you can avoid getting eaten, that'd be pretty good. So that's our Ephemeroptera. They're very important as food for fish and birds. Trout fishermen are very aware of mayflies because there's a lot of different patterns that are mayfly patterns, both as nymphs and as adults. The adults, they hatch out, they only live for a day, then the females will actually land on water to lay eggs, and when they do so, trout just eat those things up like crazy. So they make for great flies for fly fishing. And they're very sensitive to pollution, so they're really good indicators of water quality. As we just saw, all those mayflies on the water, they are that's a good sign of healthy water. When we first started really polluting the Mississippi River and really polluting the Great Lakes, one of the first things to go was all the mayflies. These huge mayfly outbreaks kind of disappear. Some people are like, oh, that's probably good. Like, it's not good. It's really bad. It's really bad. Right? You don't wipe out all the mayflies. You don't want to just turn your lake into trash. So the fact that they're coming back is a really good sign. Like I said, they live all their life in the water, and then just hatch out for a day and then lay eggs. And it can be years that they live underwater, filtering water, cleaning water, but then die really easily. And I just want to kind of point out here the long front legs you can see on this one, very, very long front legs on some of these. All right, and then our last order for today are the Odonata, the dragonflies and damselflies. These are also really cool. You should be fairly familiar with them. They're really, really great. They're two pairs of wings. And these are called Paleoptera with the mayflies and the dragonflies. They can only move their wings in one plane, up and down, basically. We'll find when we get to more complicated insects, they have a different way of folding their wings over their back together. And you're looking at this damselfly right here, and you're probably saying, well, that's folded wings, but that's not actually what I mean, because the damselfly wings just go out and back in, and that's still in that one plane that they can be moved. But as we get out of the Paleoptera, paleo meaning old, ptera meaning wing, the old form of wings, all the other insects have this better wing folding than we see. These are also immatures develop in water. There's also hemimetabolous insects. So we have lots of nymphs in the water, and then they emerge to be adults. They live a lot longer than a mayfly. Dragonflies will live for a while. They're voracious predators as nymphs and as adults. Dragonflies are some of the best hunters, the best visual hunters in the insect world, probably in the world, actually. They're extremely fast. They can change direction, move very quickly, and they can see everything. You can see most of the head is occupied by compound eyes. And we'll talk about the difference between damselflies and dragonflies in a second. Chewing mouth parts, target development, membranous wings. The membranous wings, they have these large wings with all these veins going, and venation is a really good way of separating families, which we won't get too much into. The nymphs are just awesome predators, and they have this mandible that shoots out and extends. It folds out underneath their chin and kind of just waits there, and then they just shoot it out and grab fish. They'll grab little fish, they'll grab other insects, they'll grab all sorts of things. Crazy predators. Like here's one kind of showing grabbing a little guppy. They just sit there and just reach out and grab those things. And there's a little YouTube video here you can watch. Again, it's posted in the lesson. So what are the difference between dragonflies and damselflies? Well, dragonflies, when they're at rest, they hold their wings outstretched to the side, right, all the way out to the side. And again, they can only beat up and down. Their eyes touch in the middle, and they're huge, even bigger. There's two massive eyes on their head, and they touch along the middle for the most part. Not every dragonfly does that, actually. The gomphids, the clubtails don't, but they get pretty close. They're wide abdomen, they're bulkier, they're heavier, they're bigger for the most part. Those are dragonflies. Damselflies, they hold their wings together at rest. Their eyes are separated by most of their head. There's a big gap in there. They have a very skinny, slender abdomen. So that's the difference between dragonflies and damselflies. And so the life cycle of these, both of them, they're aquatic. So the imago, or the spinner, that will lay eggs in the water. The eggs will turn into nymphs. And again, it can be a few months to a few years. Actually, some maybe even a few weeks. And then they hatch back out. Usually with mayflies, it's a year or a couple of years because they all come out together at the same time, often in May. But it's actually not always in May. There's a number that hatch out at different times of year. Dragonflies is not timed nearly like that. You have an egg, it just starts growing, gets bigger and bigger, eating other stuff, other insects and fish all along the way. Then it's big enough, it just emerges, hatches out, finds a mate, mates with it, lays eggs again, and just has the big circle of life that way. All right, so that is kind of it for these orders. We've got Protrua, Collembola, Dipleura, Archaeognatha, Zygentoma, and then our Paleoptera here. That's kind of what's covered here. Make sure you know those key characteristics, what they look like, know the names. Those are the kind of things we will be tested on. And see you next time.